Welcome to the Evolve 360 Shelly Shell Show with hosts Shelly Grace and Shelly Divine. So we're just so excited to kick off season 2, Conscious Evolution, by discussing life and business with soul. And we're planning to interview several guests with extraordinary backgrounds in business and in life, and to ask the question, what will it take to evolve consciously? So our first guest of this season is an entrepreneur and innovator who seeks to combine his legal expertise and consulting experience to assist his clients in process improvement and integration of technology, planning for opportunities, managing costs, and reducing risk. He has advised many startups and works to help small business owners to grow by tactically addressing their business needs and aligning their goals with personal objectives and plans. His professional experience also includes working as an advisor in the mergers and acquisitions and investment management practices for both PricewaterhouseCoopers and Deloitte, where he advised Fortune 100 clients in private equity, venture capital, and strategic buyers on tax, legal, and business issues related to buying and selling businesses and investments. He's a creative problem solver who brings deep tax, legal, and business experience to each client relationship. And we know from personal experience, because we've been working with him, how terrific he is. I'd like to welcome to the show, Teddy Joyce. Hey guys, welcome to the show. This is season 2 and we got Teddy.
And we got Teddy. Welcome, Teddy. Woohoo!
Be here with both of you.
It's so great to see you guys. I mean, Teddy's been off. We've been meeting with Ted now for every week, once a week. He's been helping us with developing our business, and launching it and everything. So we wanted to share with you listeners our great guru and business development manager guy, dude, like just awesome person, and we just want to share. We got like a ton of good questions, and we want you to learn a little bit more about him, because I guess we would really like to have him on the show a lot more. But we'll see.
And Shelly, I'm trying to figure out how to absorb the positive, like this crazy amount of energy that the two of you have, and of course the looks, the good looks.
Thank you. But this is a big shout out to all the entrepreneurs out there that are, maybe you've been having a side hustle and you really want to launch. And, Shelly and I launched this business during this COVID time, but you just don't know how to go about it. And it's so scary to be out there on your own. So we wanted to bring Teddy today to just share all the things that he has to share with you so that you could be successful in whatever you want to do. I know that because of his mentorship, Shell and I have really come a long way. So take it away, Ted.
So why don't you give our listeners a little background, or like a quick little bio of who you are, what you do, kind of what you're all about.
No, absolutely. And first, just excited to be here with both of you who I adore and love. And I think in terms of your attitude towards your own business around being positive, but at the same time, it's not just about positive attitude, it's working hard. And so, via background, Shelly, I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney now for about 20 years. I worked for 2 pretty big consulting firms before going out solo on my own, being self-employed, starting my own practice. And I think in terms of the couple things that I've really been able to do is not just own my own practice now, but I've owned businesses. So when I'm advising clients and I'm advising individuals, I kind of do it from the perspective of, yes, knowing the law, knowing taxation, but also having run a business or having run businesses, I can take that approach from a business owner and kind of understand and be able to get into the trenches with you as you're facing your challenges and issues as a business owner. And I would say even beyond the business person that I am. I think I try to be a good person overall. And hopefully that translates into positive relationships, positive vibes, positive energy. And I think you kind of take that approach with life, business, anything you have to challenge, honestly, as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, and I do a lot of things. I'm a professor. I'm a proud professor here in Boston at Northeastern. I have my law practice. I'm a real estate broker. So I do a lot of different things, right? And a part of it is I just enjoy life, and I like the variety that the things in life that come my way. So
yeah. What was it that got you to kind of like, what was the catalyst to get you to go on your own? I mean, we've had COVID for a lot of people. They're like, oh no, I don't have the same job, or
Right.
something. People might have found themselves in a pivoting scenario. They had to do something else to make ends meet. But what is the catalyst for you when, from working from, these really huge companies and then saying, okay, I think I'm going to go on my own?
yeah, interesting. I never really had the perspective that, wow, I'm going to go out on my own. I always thought I'd work for another firm, I'd move up in the ranks of an organization. But I think what I discovered was I really didn't have a purpose in terms of working for a company other than really just getting a paycheck, right? Getting a paycheck, getting my work done. And so I think as I started to kind of grow up a little bit, I started realizing that the way things that were being done, and it wasn't as if the organizations I worked with were bad. They were two very big firms, had a lot of experience. I got to travel around the world and live around the world. But it wasn't really doing what I thought was Teddy, what was me in terms of a core of both how I wanted to work with clients and the relationship that I had with clients. And in part, Shelley, because I felt a lot of pressure around hours that I'd have to charge. Working for businesses, any for-profit business knows that, you got to build time, you've got to build the work, right? You don't give it away for free.
Right.
But I really found that my personality was more of, I like to spend a lot of time with someone, and I don't necessarily look to bill every moment of that. It's about building trust, about building a relationship, because from there, you and I can get more comfortable kind of knowing each other. What are your issues? What are your concerns? And it leads to more of a long-term fluid conversation. And so, kind of getting to your question of, how did it kind of happened over time. And I still recall, people ask me sometimes, well, why did you end up working primarily in tax law? Well, when I was in law school, I remember asking around, what's one of the hardest classes here, in the program? They're like, oh, the tax courses are really tough. So I took them and I loved them. And I was like, okay, what else? So it kind of gravitated.
Who loves taxes?
It's like nobody loves
Teddy
it.
does.
Teddy does.
But and I think it's just one of those, and it's kind of like the advice that I give to companies and clients and even my students when I'm working with them, which is gravitate towards doing what you enjoy, what you love. The making a living and surviving will come along, because if you're doing something just for a paycheck, it is much harder to give up on those days when it's dreary or you're tired or whatever, because you're not really motivated by the thing that drives you, right? And so I think finding those things that kind of fit into your personality and your style, and having a holistic goal, personally and for yourself career-wise, I think it's important to define and look at. And I can tell you, I did not necessarily have a path myself. I often did not follow my own advice, but I was fortunate that it worked out to me in terms of where I landed. So,
yeah. So did you feel like
That's awesome. So I've got a question for you. Along those lines, I wanted to ask you, did you start a side hustle while you were employed, or did you just totally go full tilt and jump into the deep end and just no holds barred, started a business?
Yeah, interesting, Shelley, you asked that question in terms of in particular, the firms that I worked for, they prohibited side hustles. So you could not do a moonlighting job or something like that in terms of doing that. Mm-hmm. But when I started getting the inclination that I was going to go out on my own, one, I took advantage of what I've already been learning, right? So learning and absorbing as much as I could, doing mergers and acquisitions, doing investment management, working with high net worth individuals. So I took a lot of that experience, and even though I couldn't start the side hustle, it was preparing myself for going out there and doing that. And I think in terms
That's
of
great
it,
advice.
and I come back to Shelley, the having a plan, what is your plan? And I often counsel, individuals who come to me and say, Teddy, I'm doing this job, or, this is my career, and I'm not sure. And I kind of talk to them, let's talk about strategy, but then we also get into some legal questions. Do you have an employment agreement that prevents you from having a side hustle? If that's not an issue, then absolutely, Shelley, we get into okay, how are you going to structure this side hustle? What are you going to do? What's the plan for entry? What's the plan for exit if it doesn't work? So.
Yeah. How did you deal with your emotions on that regard when you were working for, say whatever company you were working for at the time before you exited that company? How did you feel internally? Did you feel like you were selling yourself out because you wanted to do something else, but you were obligated to, work for that company and do what they required you to do? How did you, negotiate internally how to, make that transition?
Well, I think in terms of first, it was the realization that I had contractually agreed to take on those terms, right? Which is you work for ABC company, we'll pay you. One of the things of us paying you to do this work is you're going to do it within the confines of this agreement, right? And so I think part of it, Shelley, is just me acknowledging, like, I put myself in that position. And by the way, it wasn't a horrible position.
Right.
And I think in terms of one, kind of doing a mental check. Here's what it is, right? I could either wallow in oh, woe is me, I can't do this right now, or it's okay, it is what it is. What is the next step that I could do, right? Focusing on the positives of that. And maybe to frame my response to your question in the context of, I kind of put a mental box around it for me, meaning that, okay, I can't do this, I can do that. How do I better prepare myself for the next stage? And focusing on my goal now is when I transition, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. It definitely helped me. And I go back to much of life for me is about mental image, the mental game that we play. And once I put that in a context, all of a sudden I felt like I had something to focus on. That was a positive image, right? That was a positive goal for me that helped kind of like, what I call the dark and dreary days, kind of fade away a little bit because I could focus on the positives.
Definitely. I know a lot of people, they start journaling. I know in my aspect, when I started doing my transition, I would keep a journal. I would do daily affirmations. I did a vision board. Did you do any of those? And how did that help you as you started going towards your transition?
Absolutely, Shelley. Great question. And I think for me, part of it was learning and reading things that maybe I wasn't aware of. So I started asking, what are people reading that are good books to read around, coming up with a plan? And one of them that I stumbled across was 7 Habits of Highly Successful People.
That's a great book.
And I must say that in reading this book, I think I've read it now 25 times, and I just read it over and over again. And so much of that book, what Stephen Covey describes in that book, is coming up with that plan, whether it's journaling, whether it's diarying, come up with those roles and define them for yourself. And I'll say I came up with 3 roles that were my roles. And then, I'll give you a little bit of an overview of that and some of the details. I called them body. So focusing on taking care of my body, right? I figured no matter what I was doing for a job, if I was ill or if I wasn't taking care of myself, whatever good times I would have would be limited by being sick. So body. The second part I called soul. What is the soul of Teddy? I used to go by Ted before, until I had a really bad divorce. And so I kind of went through what I called a transformation. And I kind of came Teddy, I called it Teddy 2.0, which is kind of reinventing myself.
I love it.
Yeah. And so I went from Ted to Teddy, and it was kind of an affirmation of my soul, which is a soft, gentle person. Yes, I am the law. I know the law. I carry the power of the law. But at the core of me, I'm a soft, gentle person. I call it the softer side of Sears. That was my version of this.
Oh, wow.
I'm dating.
That's really cool. It's cool that you were aware of that, but it took like a life crisis to put you to kind of redirect you, huh? Like
it was, Shelley. It was a big old
to add another skill to your internal toolbox. Of your character development and everything, right?
Absolutely. And that's so if that was body, the soul, the third part was the mind. And what I looked at was, what are the skills that I needed to develop in terms of whether it's bettering myself or bettering my opportunities for whatever I was going to do for a job. And it's funny that, you know, along this process, as I was going through, you know, somebody came into my life, my wife, Jenny now. And I remember still, I had the board written up on the wall. I really believe in being a visual, tactile person. So if I have something to look at, it's easier for me to focus on that, something that I can see or the plan that I have. And I remember the only thing that Jenny really changed in that plan is, you know, I had body, mind, soul. I had these relevant goals under each one. And one goal that I added at the very bottom of the list was marry Jenny, right? You know, I met her. And so I think in terms of going back, you know, to your question around, you know, what are the things, I think for me was finding tools to arm yourself to be able to tackle life, right? Both from a positive attitude, but at the same time, you know, I strongly believe that a lot of it is luck, but it's also about us putting ourselves in the right place so that luck has an opportunity to find you.
You know, and you mentioned something so important that I want everybody to know is that many of us has gone through those gut-wrenching, life-changing moments that you don't even know if you're going to make it.
Right.
And if we go with the flow and if we allow, we transform into a totally better version of ourselves. And I just love the way that you just totally tapped into that inner soul of yours and decided that, hey, Ted is not my persona anymore. I've got a new life vision and Teddy is me, Teddy 2.0. I just love that. I really do.
No, and it's, I came up with playlists, you know, Teddy 2.0. I came up with, you know, new color schemes for me. I almost did like a new branding, new logo, the whole thing, right?
Right.
You know, and Shelly, one thing just to note real quick on a final point on this, at least, is I'll admit that it took me hitting a very deep bottom, one that I actually contemplated killing myself.
Yeah.
And so I say that in the context of obviously whoever's listening to this, you know, friends, relationships, businesses, things do get tough. Things do get hard. And I still remember, I remember vividly where I was sitting, where I was laying on the floor when I hit that bottom. And all of a sudden, when I hit this really dark bottom, when I was like, oh my God, like life is over, I started laughing and crying at the same time. And I realized at that point in time that I liked myself too much that I would not kill myself. And it was kind of like, it was like, you know, Shelly, absolutely, thank goodness. It was a big aha moment. It was a big aha moment for me. And that was kind of where I started this upward, you know, kind of climb out of that. But, you know, having said that, I want to fully acknowledge people do hit bottoms, and it's just a matter of hoping, having a lifeline, you know, people around you, you know, the mental state. I'm very proud to say I have a therapist that I still, you know, talk to once a month, you know, so, and that's just a part of not that I'm broken. It's, you know, I'm keeping myself in a good state. So.
Yes. It's like taking a car in for a tune-up. You know, it's so important.
Exactly right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, you know, when people do go through that sort of a crisis and they hit that rock bottom and finding something, or maybe noticing an emotional state within themselves that they can, you know, start to spiral back up, you know, and pull themselves out of that really low, you know, feeling of just, you know, just completely depressed and no will to, you know, continue on. But thankfully you found that in yourself. I know I had been there too. Right. I had, and it wasn't easy to come out of it. There was one point I was so close to just slitting my wrists and I just looked at the knives and I was like, what am I doing? And I prayed. And then I said, God, just help me because what happens, what people don't realize, or, you know, people who might not have gone through this, or people that have gone through this know. And I think is your mind, you can't shut it off, and you can't shut off negative thoughts. You can allow them to pass, but when they pass through, they're continually going. And if you focus on them, God, you know, like you end up going down into that abyss. And to get yourself out of it, sometimes you can't do it alone.
Right.
And I know people that have been unable to do that. They've done yoga, they've done meditation, they've spoken to therapists, they have done all this. And instead what they had to do some other things that are, they had to seek out medical treatment that was very, very invasive to them, but it saved their lives. So if anybody is listening to the show, if you are in that kind of state, reach out and call somebody, pick up the phone and call somebody, reach out there. There are services that will help. But on the other end of it is prayer. For me is what helped me. And I just said, I called in Grace and I'm like, just help me sleep. And then I just felt like I was blanketed with some sort of higher power that came over me. I went and laid down and I could sleep, and I just, zonked out. And then the next day it was a new day. Yeah. And I picked myself up. It wasn't easy, and just kind of went forward and kept, trudging along, moving forward. And it's kind of like, maybe, like where people might be at today with this COVID stuff. I want to go back to your tax stuff a little bit because, with everything that's going on with the COVID stuff, and people got maybe grants, this, the beginning of the year when they locked everything down, and coming into, 2021, and we have to file taxes for last year. What's it going to be like for, maybe even people that had small businesses and have, took unemployment, like if they were self-employed and they.
But if I'd like to put a pause on that, because I want to piggyback on what you guys were talking about, because we are in a state right now. And I know when I went through my dark night of the soul, mind you, it was helplessness. I didn't have control over anything. Right. And I've always been a person that was always in control. And because of that helplessness, I was in a dark, dark abyss, and I just didn't see the light at the end of that tunnel. And I felt the same way Shelly and Teddy did. I didn't know if I wanted to go another day, but I love myself too much. I know that there's people that need me in my life, and I love life, and I like helping others, that I turned to prayer as well. And I did make sure that I didn't lose my joy, because I'm a very happy person. Right. But if you're listening to us today and you do feel that helplessness, please reach out. And with that, I want everybody to know that we're starting this series with Teddy because we want to help you so that you don't feel helpless. And I think it's a great way now for Shell, what you were saying about the monies, and, you have extra monies. How are we going to play this? And how do we move forward? Because we always have to move forward no matter who we are.
Yeah, absolutely, Shelly. And let me take both of your points. Shelly, yours about, facing the dark and how to go through it. And then Shelly, let me address that in the context of what I call the end of 2020 tax planning. We've had PPP monies, you may have EIDL monies. And so let me start with, I'm sitting on a couch about a week and a half ago with my 5-year-old, almost 6-year-old niece and my 3-year-old, almost 4-year-old nephew. Wow. And we're watching Finding Nemo. And I think for me, Finding Nemo, and in a particular scene, if you recall from the movie, there's a scene where they have the mask, they're trying to recover the mask to find out where they can get Nemo. And the mask gets lost in the dark, right? It falls and descends down into this abyss. And Marlin is looking down in the dark. He's scared. He doesn't know what to do. And Dory grabs him by the fin and she says, just keep swimming. And I kind of feel like this, sometimes getting into darkness, and pick whatever it is. It doesn't have to be the mask for you. It could be pending tax deadlines. It could be a divorce. It could be a child that's sick, whatever it may be, just keep swimming. Just keep breathing. And I think in the context of that, at the very least, keep swimming, keep moving means you're one step closer to achieving a goal, achieving a finish. Now, let me take that approach now and let's apply it to the questions you had, Shelly, around PPP, EIDLs. And here are the things that I'm getting right now as we're coming towards the end of the calendar year for tax returns. A lot of folks who receive these PPP monies, much of the PPP money, if you document it, is forgivable, meaning that you don't have to repay the loan. Usually, a loan that is forgiven is what we call COD, cancellation of debt income, right? So it's canceled, you don't have to repay the loan, but then whatever happens to that money that you got, well, it's treated as income. Well, Congress, when they passed PPP and when it became a law, in essence said, okay, we're going to edit these rules a little bit. It's not going to be income to you, even though you get it canceled, but there's still some ramifications to this PPP money that people have to be thinking about. So let's say I had a significant drop of income for 2020, which most of us did through COVID-19.
Yeah.
And then I received this PPP loan and those monies can be forgiven, right? So I don't have to repay it back. In addition to not repaying it though, what the law says is, but you also cannot use that money and what you paid for it against your income statement. Meaning if I have income from my business otherwise, and I use this money to pay my employees, to pay for rent, to pay things that PPP money qualified for,
Right.
I can't then use that deduction against my income. So what do you have? You have a falsely, well, yeah, it's not false because it's taxable. I still have 10,000 of income with no expenses to offset it. So what does that do? That creates an artificially high tax liability. So I advise clients as they're going now to the end of the year to look at your current financial position. Yes, I had a decrease in income, but I also don't have those expenses to offset that income. And so I still may owe taxes, even though I made a lot less than I did in previous years. And that's what I see the aha moment of people facing right now, many businesses facing when they come to this end of the year is, well, wait a minute, my income didn't increase. How is my tax increasing? Well, because you have no expenses to offset that income, whatever amount you had. So planning ahead, things like that are part of the, I do believe very firmly in, positive attitude and, thinking positive, but thinking positive and positive attitude without action does not get you very far. And so planning ahead and thinking through these issues, Shelley, going to your question, those are the things that I'd be thinking about right now. And it's not just PPP monies, it's what else can I be doing before the end of this year? Do I put money into a retirement plan? Can I prepay some expenses that are 2021 expenses, but I can use them to write off in 2020? So things like this that you should be thinking about, and I call it not just tax issues, I call them business issues. And I strongly agree, or I strongly advocate for the fact that taxes are not bad. Having a good tax plan can help you work through a tax challenge or a tax problem. And honestly, without taxes, we don't have roads. Without taxes, we don't have public works. Without taxes, we don't have infrastructure. So I'm an advocate for not having to pay any more taxes than I have to, but I do believe in paying my fair share.
Sure.
And I think, that means for individuals and for companies, how does, and this is Shelley, going back to your question around strategy, oftentimes people don't connect together the impact that the tax in the business has to do with what you pay as the owner of that business. And it comes to questions like what type of entity you have. And if you don't have an entity, why not, right? So questions like that, or, what is your liability exposure? What are the things that you should be thinking about? And what I try to do is get it so that the dark that you may be facing doesn't become darker, but you start seeing a light at the end of the tunnel.
Right. And I love how you say plan ahead, because a lot of times people think, oh, I don't have to think about taxes till 2021, but no, you got to think about them now so you can strategize and make sure that you take care of yourself as much as possible and not wait till the 11th hour where you're not going to be able to put some money away in a retirement plan to offset what you owe, especially if you have a business to balance it out. So it's a great point that you brought up, Teddy. Great point.
Yeah. It's so interesting. And, people like, I kind of can't help but point out, people hate taxes. I mean, they really it's always an issue.
But do you think they hate it or they just don't understand it and they're scared of it?
I think maybe don't understand them, scared. They don't appreciate what they do pay for. Or maybe they don't like where that money is going, depending on where you are age-wise. I mean, if you're a young couple and you got great public schools, taxes are paying for that. But if you're, in your 60s or 70s, you're like, I don't want to contribute to that school down the street anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what it is.
Well, and I think, let's use that example too, Shelley, and I think those are very good extremes that I think should also, and once again, I agree with you. It's a matter of opinion, but factually to some extent, where does the revenue come from for public works, right? How do we all benefit from streets? Well, I can drive a car, right? I'm not driving on a cornfield. And so, an example of a young family who's starting a family or, like looking to put their kids in school, one of the things that I say to my wife, like when we're looking to buy a home, that type of thing, and we don't have children, which is I look to find communities that have a good school system, because I believe that they're spending money to be able to keep those schools doing well. And everybody in that community benefits, including the retired person who, yes, they're paying taxes that go to pay for schools. But if people are moving into those communities, you can probably bet that the value of your home is going up as a result of these improvements in your community. So I think you can, and I'm not an expert in this area, but I think you can find some correlation between educational systems and the value of homes in a community.
Totally.
Quality of
And
that.
a value of life,
right?
Value of life, because we want to educate the young folk to be the future leaders. I mean, I totally believe in that.
Yeah, same here.
So we got to put money where the kids are for education.
Yeah, and and I think in terms of going back, Shelley, to your question about PPP, as I tell some of my students, what we do today is not necessarily going to be paid for by me, the old fogies of the world. It's going to be paid for by next generation. And so what are we doing currently to kind of take care of those children, take care of those grandchildren?
That's right.
And I think it's meaning that we have to be responsible. And I don't want to get into discussions of politics on this call, but I think in terms of, I think we all have to bear responsibility for our actions. I do agree that as a government, COVID-19 and the effects on the economy and effect on people's lives has been huge. And then we need to do things to help our neighbors, help our fellow Americans, et cetera. But we also need to be thinking about how we're going to pay for this long term. I do believe we can't just keep kicking the can down the road. So
right. Well, our whole season, which I didn't really bring up until now, is about conscious evolution. That's the whole, that's what season 2 of the Evolve 360 show is about. And it's about consciously moving forward. And I think a big thing is to consciously move forward financially, in the collective too, as a whole global and health wise. I think those are 2 big factors. So everything that you're speaking about, Teddy, is so true. And we do have a power of choice, but we can make these collective choices, as we move forward, in our lives and in business and just the day to day,
Yes.
And what often happens is, I think, Shelley, we get lost in the day to day.
Yeah.
So that we forget to drink that extra glass of water. We forget to take those extra steps. We forget to go to boot camp, So, I think the life catches up with us, but I come back to the whole, one, keep swimming, that's okay, but you still have to put yourself first. Like I firmly agree or believe you can't take care of your children if you don't take care of yourself first. You can't take care of your grandchildren if you haven't planned for your own retirement. So keeping an eye on, and I often like to say, what's your dashboard? What do you look at to assess what your current health is, what your current financial situation is, what your current income and expenses are, right? And so without that dashboard, it's really hard for you to be able to kind of, make decisions, because you're kind of making, to some extent, uneducated decisions about your own position, right? So.
Yeah,
Good
it's
points.
good to have all the facts, right?
Totally. Great points.
Yeah. Do you what are your personal habits, Ted, or a routine that contributes to, your success, especially coming out of your own, trials and tribulations?
Yeah. I would say,
And how do you manage everything? Because it seems like you're a busy guy. You do a lot.
Yeah.
I do. And I'll tell you, there are days that I don't manage it. I mean, there are many days where it's just like, whoa.
Stay in bed with the covers up to your neck.
I do believe in a mental health recovery day, right? Which is if you're burned out, you're fried, like it's okay to just lay in bed and watch Finding Nemo 25 times until
I love it.
so that's the aspect of being human. And I would say that you watch people on TV or and people that you admire, and all of them are humans just like we are, right? Some of them maybe just be better at sticking within what I call bookmarks, right? The beginning of the day and the end of the day. And I need bookmarks to some extent. And I'll admit to you, my wife will tell you that I try to be an early bird, but I'm often a night owl, right? And so, trying to stick with and acknowledging your bookmarks. So here are a couple of things that I kind of come up with, Shelley, in terms of I would say, good habits. First is, and once again, let me point out, I like to say them. I don't always do them, but I strive for them. The first one is having a glass of water by the side of my bed so that I wake up in the morning. The first thing I start off with is chugging a big glass of water. Okay. It helps the body, it helps the mind, and also it helps kind of control some of my hunger craving because Teddy Joyce can eat. Right? So, having a good glass of water, to start off the morning is right. I think second thing is then also focusing on positive attitude. I think a lot of times I may already start my mind is racing in terms of I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this. I come back to okay, let me take care of me. Did I have breakfast first? Yes. Did I pick up my wife's Wall Street Journal that's waiting outside? Okay, yes. All right. So I think put it into context, those things that are good habit of glass of water, waking up, then kind of positive attitude. The next is I would call the do no harm. In other words, as you're going out in the world, approach it with, I'm here to help people, whether it's in my business, whether it's me interacting with others, do no harm. But I also like to say, take no shit. So, and forgive me, you can edit this for
oh, no, I love it.
But, boundaries.
So I think there's boundaries to everything, and I think in terms of, so I start with do no harm, be kind, be positive. My wife is a perfectly good example of this. She's got very soft edges to her. She's so easy to get along with. And so I think that's the approach we should use in the world is be kind to others, be kind to yourself. But that does not mean that you let somebody just trample over you, right? Whether it's a contract issue, whether it's a legal issue, whether it's a relationship issue. And, examples I like to point out is, and this is my opinion, obviously, but if someone is a family member and they treat you rudely, it doesn't mean that I have to keep treating you like a family member, right? It's owned love and respect. And so I kind of take that approach in terms of the do no harm, right? So I'm trying not to go out there and you're purposely trying to be good in the world. But at the same time, take no shit, in the process of doing that, right? So I think those are, what I call my top three in terms of goals that take me, that kind of start off the day. And I think also just having a to-do list, I have my to-do list on the wall here.
Ooh, yeah.
I kind of like to have the check box because it makes me feel good to know that I had something up on the screen and then I checked it off, or I dealt with it. And if it's anything, just a feeling of I accomplished something, because often when I finish the day, I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't get anything done. And then I look at the board going, no, actually you did, or fire drills happen, right? So where do I squeeze those fire drills?
That's a good point. Busy people, because you always feel that you haven't done anything all day, and then you look at your list and you've done 50 things.
Yeah.
Right.
Good point. Good point.
And that is often part of, giving yourself credit to say, look, and unless it's a work day and I spent the whole day Finding Nemo, which I shouldn't have been, but I've had those days. I've had those days. At least I can look and say, look, I got this done, right? I got this accomplished. I got this completed.
Yeah.
And I think it's important at least for me to kind of have those things, in perspective so that I know what I'm trying to accomplish and how I'm going to get it done.
Yeah. And then you value yourself and you're appreciating yourself for what you did accomplish. Because I think oftentimes people forget to do that. And then their self-worth their self-esteem starts to plummet and they don't realize that they're putting out all this, they're doing all this
Yeah.
work or stuff, or
Especially if you're a solopreneur.
Yeah.
Exactly. Or you're starting a business. You do so many things and you wear so many hats. And 6 months go by, and it's important to take a pause and look back and say, see how far you've come.
Yeah.
And acknowledge it and value yourself. I love what Shell said, because a lot of times we don't.
Yeah.
And it's important.
And then
It
you
really
wonder
is.
why people have this issue of being not enough, or they have low self-esteem, or they feel unworthy or whatever. It's because they're not actually living and breathing in the moment and saying, I love this whole checkbox thing that Teddy just said, because it's like you see it.
I love it.
And you're like, wow, thank you, universe. Thank you, universe. I just did that. Thank you. Okay, what's next? And then you're starting to, keep that vibration, like what you were talking about earlier, of like, you know what, I really like myself. You acknowledged yourself. I like myself. I love myself. Shelley, you did it too. I did it too. But, to get yourself out of, those cycles of even if you're just bored, and you're like, what am I doing? Especially sitting home around, COVID, and you're home all day and you're like, what am I doing or whatever? And just having those little checks, like, oh, wow, I actually did accomplish something. That makes me feel great.
Yeah, and I would say, at the top of that checklist, Shelley, as I'm, thinking more of that is, maybe one of the first things on there is to give yourself a hug. It's funny that I think about once someone told me to say, maybe sometimes, have you ever tried to hug yourself? And I'm like, that's ridiculous. Hugging myself, I've never heard of such a thing. And I remember one night, it was just, like a bad day. I hadn't, and I couldn't sleep, and like I was stressed. I was like anxious. I'd never had anxiety attacks before, and this is a moment in my life where I had them. And I remember I did, all right, fine. I laid on the bed, I put my arms on myself like this, I closed my eyes, and I was like, oh my God, this works. And so I'm not saying that the hug yourself is necessarily the answer for you, but find what works for you. Right. And don't dismiss that. Don't dismiss how you feel. Don't dismiss how you think, because it's something that, as you said, Shelley, a lot of times it's not hard to, it's very hard to control oftentimes within your mind. And so trying to put that on kind of an autopilot of, positive thought, positive thinking, doing things for you. And let me leave you just on this, the empowering myself through life, Shelley, question is what I translate your question to be. The last one is that I have here is I remember when my godfather passed away. My godfather was extra special. His name was Santos, Jorge Olivardia. And I remember my godfather, just to give you a little bit about him, when I went to an interview with this really big firm that I was going to go work for, I said, hey, godfather, let's have lunch. Let's meet downtown Boston and let's have lunch before I need to go to this interview. Right? Like a formal interview. I'm in a suit and I'm like all dressed up, and I meet with my godfather. Padrino is the word for godfather in Spanish. And so I often refer to him as Padrino. And so I'd be, hey, Padrino, I'm so excited about this interview. And he's asking me questions, about what's the work that you think you'd be doing, and where's your office, and blah, blah. And I was like, so I told him all that. And as we wrap up the lunch, right, because I have to go to this interview, he gets up with me and I'm like, okay, godfather. I give him a hug and I'm like, oh, I'll see you later. He's like, no, I'm going with you. I'm like, I'm sorry. He's like, oh, I'm going to go with you. And I'm like, I don't know, I'm going to an interview. Like, it's this big firm, like, he's like, okay, yeah. He's like, okay, no big deal. Yep, I'm going to, he was like, no big deal. So I'm like, okay. So we walk into the building. Wow. It's like the 27th floor of this building, this office, downtown Boston. And I come up to the reception desk, and it's this big marbled hall. I remember, like, I've never seen something like this on one.
Wow.
And I walk up to the lady and I'm like, hi, I'm Ted Joyce. I was Ted at that time.
Ted.
I'm Ted Joyce. I'm here for my interview at 3:00 or whatever it was. And she's like, oh, okay. Thank you, Mr. Joyce. Have a seat. We'll be with you in just a minute. And then my godfather's standing next to me. And my padrino always was well dressed. He was always just immaculate. He wore a fedora. He had his trench coat on, etc. Wow. And the lady looked at him and looked at him and says, I'm sorry, sir, who are you here to see? And she's like, no, I'm his godfather. I'm here with him. And she's like, hold on a second, you're his godfather? And the lady laughed. She's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
God, this is awesome. And that was him, right? That was just him, right? It was no big deal. And I remember at the funeral, his son, what he said about my godfather, I think is also something that I pass on to everyone listening here, which was, you're better than no one else, right? Don't assume to be arrogant or that you're, that you're superior to anyone. You're better than no one else, but at the same time, you're inferior to no one. So understanding that and putting it in the context of, I'm not looking to beat you. I'm not looking to be better than you, right? We're equal, whether it's any aspect of life. But at the same time, I'm not inferior to you. I'm just as smart. I'm just as talented. I'm just as good. And I feel like that was such an epitome or a description of my godfather in terms of okay, great, you got a big firm interview, whatever. I'm still your godfather, so he just showed up, and I still think, like, that's one of the greatest memories of my life, honestly.
That is a beautiful story, Teddy, because so many times, you get so intimidated by going into these places, and you're so right about what you said. We're no better than anybody. We're all the same. And what a beautiful story.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the aha moment for you too.
Yeah.
That's like so cool. That's a great story.
It is.
It really is. And it's great to, obviously he's a person in your life that you probably learned, obviously a tremendous amount,
Yeah.
but looking up to as a figure in your life that, it's good to have a good role model.
It really is.
And for your godfather to be like that too.
Yeah.
I don't know if we get that too much nowadays, having the godfather.
Yeah, exactly.
It really is. And I think I use it sometimes as a reminder to myself when I find myself stressed. I kind of do hey, you've been through a really bad patch in your life and you made it through that. So it's kind of put it into perspective. And I say that to people right now going through the challenges of maybe a second wave of COVID-19, that, and I'm not trying to dismiss, how dangerous this thing is. But, we've survived it and we've been able to get through it. Obviously, we've lost a lot of people. But I think it's about being positive, about reminding yourselves that, reminding ourselves, we can get through this. We can survive. And it's as soon as we start being divisive and it's us versus them, we versus whomever else, that's when we start to undercut ourselves, right? Instead of working together to kind of find solutions. So.
Yes, good points.
Yeah. Have you ever felt really like, because of the environment, vulnerable, or maybe in the workplace vulnerable, in not just COVID, but anything else?
Yeah, it's funny that an example I have of vulnerability was, and I would say I learned something about myself. I had been working on this project for a couple of weeks, really exhausted, working very long days. And I used to travel every week from Miami Beach, where I lived, to Atlanta for client work. And so I'd literally fly to Atlanta for a couple of days and I'd come back and fly back to Miami. And I remember it was a Thursday afternoon, like 2:00 in the afternoon. I'd been working like 3 weeks straight, every single day, 12 to 15 hours a day. Exhausted, I'm going home. And as I'm leaving the Atlanta office, I see this partner look at me and, it's like 2:00 or 3:00 in the afternoon. And he's like, well, you're going home early, aren't you? And I remember I lost my mind. I went into his office and I'm literally yelling at this partner going, do you realize the hours that I've been working here? And I'm going home, I'm exhausted, I'm tired. And on top of that, I've been trying to set the example to people that we still are humans, we still got to get some sleep, et cetera, right?
Right.
In the moment of me being angry, I kind of lost my stuff, right? And I think in terms of the vulnerability, Shelly, for me was I think when I'm tired, when I'm exhausted like that, is not the time for me to, be lecturing somebody or, I think you got to understand, what state you're in. If you're tired, you're exhausted, take a break. If you're frustrated, if you're really dealing with COVID-19 and it's really bothering you, have a conversation with someone. And so I think for me, the vulnerability, and I realized was, that in that moment of being tired, in that moment of being exhausted is not when I should be making the best decisions or should be making decisions. And I would say that in the context of people that are running their businesses and are running their companies, don't let your emotions take over what you're trying to do. And I think oftentimes I find that with people who run companies who are emotionally feeling like, oh, I have so much vested in this, blood, sweat, and tears and time. Well, sometimes getting the perspective of somebody to come in to say, yeah, but maybe it's the time to shut it down.
Yeah.
It may not necessarily be that you stay emotionally tied to it. You need to disconnect from that. That it sometimes takes somebody else as an outside person to help you see that. Right. And so I think that's part of the understanding and recognize, I'm vulnerable. I'm too emotionally connected to this. I need to detach from it to be able to make a decision. Is the power of having relationships, people around you who can give you honest opinions about whatever it may be. So,
yeah. I think that's
yeah.
interesting, especially with, what may be coming ahead for a lot of business owners on what to do, coming into, ending this year and then going into the next year, where there's still a lot of uncertainty with how things are going to be economically. Any other things that you could suggest for people like on that route, especially if you are a business owner or you're thinking to start an upstart, how to frame it?
Absolutely, Shelley. And I think,
these
that's a great question to ask. And I especially think even with COVID-19,
Mm.
there are still opportunities to start a business and to buy a business, right? And so right now, what you're finding is a lot of companies who are not prepared for something like, and I'm not going to even say COVID-19, nobody could have prepared for COVID-19. But if you're not prepared, meaning that if you don't have some money in the kitty for savings, I would not go out there and start buying a business, right? If you don't know what you have in terms of, if you're starting a business or you're starting your side hustle and you're going to rely on that for income, well, what happens if it doesn't pick up right away? What if you don't sign that big contract right away? So oftentimes part of the planning is advising people to say, look, COVID-19 could be a great opportunity for you to buy a business. There's a lot of distressed businesses out there that you could buy them on 20 cents on the dollar. I have clients who are buying businesses right now. But I think before you get to that, what I call the decision of buying a business, I come back to that. When you get on an airplane, what do they tell you? Take care of yourself first. Put on your own mask before you can put on someone else's. Well, I'd say the same thing here. Do you have money in the bank, reserves, a line of credit, family who's supporting you so that you can take on this side hustle, so you can start a business, so you can acquire somebody else's businesses. And so I think those are part of the coming up with that strategy, coming up with the approach to do that. Because what I don't want to have is, a scenario where someone has started and acquired a business, they were doing well, but they didn't think about what it was going to take. And I mean things like, how will your quality of life change? If you've got children at home and you're starting a business and now you don't have support to take care of the children, et cetera, and you're still trying to run the business, how do you manage those questions? How do you manage those issues? So I think right now is, I would not say the best scenario for everyone to be buying, but let me get it straight though, not everyone is not buying. There are a lot of people who are buying or starting businesses, and there are many companies that are doing very well. It's just understanding what's your goal and what's your plan. So
that's a great answer, Ted. So true. Because sometimes we want to start a business because of our emotion, but we don't plan.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Emotion takes us a long way until all of a sudden the first bills start coming through and you realize you can't pay bills with emotions.
Yeah, and you're looking, how am I going to stay inspired? How am I going to stay motivated?
Right.
I mean, it's like eating your shit sandwich. It's like you gotta really like it.
You do. You always have to
plan to keep it going.
Yeah.
But not only that, you also have to plan. I had a friend that almost went bankrupt because they got a huge order into Walmart and Sam's, and they couldn't produce it fast enough.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. If you're at that cusp of doing great things in the world, you also have to plan.
Right. Be prepared for success too, right?
Totally. You have to plan for success.
Yeah.
You have to plan.
Yeah. So we'll have to have a whole strategic, how to start up a business from scratch with Teddy. We'll do a whole
absolutely
little series on that, because I think, coming into the new year, people are going to be probably looking to, reorganize, restructure. some people may be working for companies now that they want to pivot and start something new. So some strategies to help people with that would be, I think, a huge thing for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Happy to do that.
So Teddy, I have a question for you. What are you currently reading that would be inspiring for all of us out here?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm a big fan of history,
Okay.
and in particular, the American Revolution.
Okay.
And I think right now I'm looking for something to inspire me about how we kind of came together as a country. And so I'm actually reading The British Are Coming.
Oh, wow.
Which I really find inspiring and exciting, because it's not just, hurrah, hurrah, America Revolution. It is also factually based, right? So a lot of it is kind of looking at what the British were thinking and doing at the time of the American Revolution. I don't think every British person was a, horrible, terrible, and so I like kind of history, but with some fact behind it.
Love it.
You're
So
looking at like the whole tax situation.
yeah, and it's funny that so much of what started of our American Revolution was based upon taxes.
Yes.
Taxation, the Stamp Act, and then also stamp and taxes related to tea imports, etc. And so it is so much of our American Revolution was tied to taxation. Right. Which was really great. And
it's all about the money, guys. It's all about the money.
And let me put in a pitch, if you don't mind. My wife and I are very proud members of the Museum of the American Revolution, which happens to be in Philadelphia.
Oh.
And so it's a great museum in terms of getting to know about America, getting to know about our history. It's a great place to visit. I'd say it's something that ties into some of the readings that I'm doing right now. But yeah, Shelley, I've been on a kick with American Revolution, and I'm a huge fan of David McCullough. And so pretty much anything that he prints, I have either read or am reading. I really like his work. So
great. I wonder if they have virtual tours, because I know a lot of the museums do have virtual tours.
They do. You actually, if you go to their website, you look up the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia. They do have virtual tours that you can participate in. You can actually click and go into the various rooms, so doing things like that are also part of the, getting out of the everyday that is my little office, my little guest bedroom here that I work out of.
Yes, yeah.
So
it's all about expanding our minds virtually these days, right?
Absolutely. That's so neat. I mean, Shelley and I did a whole 4 or 5 episodes on the beginning of our country and everything last season. So I actually am still fascinated with how things have been in our past and how we keep repeating these cycles over and over again, and how they are going to apply today. And as we move forward and evolve, not just our country, but also, as a globe, as a world. All together. So it's really fascinating. And what was really fascinating to me was with the elections that we just had, not to get into politics, but how globally, how other countries were so concerned about what was happening in this country.
Right.
And I found that heartwarming because they were. And they were really like, and it says to me just how important this nation is, and how we are, leaders. We have people in this country that are doing, phenomenal, amazing things to progress our species and hopefully to progress like the planet as a whole, keeping the earth safe, keeping, sustainable, coming up with businesses that have sustainability for the environment as well as for the human race. And one of the things that I was going to start the podcast with, which I didn't, was I just am so blown away by next year, these 3 guys, these 3 mavericks, these 3 pioneers who are entrepreneurs want to go into space. I mean, they've been working on this for the last 10 plus 20 years. However, they're so much closer to doing it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
just amazing. And who
It
are we
is.
talking about? I mean, Jeff Bezos, we have Elon Musk, and then Richard Branson, who are huge. We just got to talk about, like, going into space, because I know Teddy likes this stuff too. And I
I
Totally, I
know,
totally do.
right?
you
You know,
know,
and Shelley, there's actually another SpaceX launch that is scheduled for this Saturday.
yeah. I
I'd
didn't
say
even know it was that soon. Wow.
yeah, I think it's
Over here in Florida, right?
yeah, I believe it's
Yeah.
in Florida, Shelley, and it's
Space
there are two or
Arrow.
three this after, or two or three Saturday the 14th scheduled launch. And for those of us who watched it back in May, I was still amazed to see how the primary engine that launched this thing into space was able to land back on Earth 8 minutes after it launched.
Isn't that
Wow.
amazing?
That is
Just
amazing.
unbelievable.
It's
Right?
mind blowing. I'm like, wow. And to land right, exactly
Right.
That's right.
I am
Yeah.
like, wow, how did they do that? I mean,
I don't want to date myself, but it's a fascinating time to be alive and think about everything that all of us have seen from, just the beginning of the phone that we hold in our hands. I remember when those big giant brick things came out, like in the 80s, right? Who would have said that we can operate our entire business by a 4x7 or 4x4 exactly phone? Like,
And-
you don't need an office anymore. And just think about, I remember when I was born, black and white TV and all this stuff. And it's just, I'm just blown away at what we have been, happening in this world. It's just really cool to be alive now, and all the opportunities that are going to be put forth because of all the new things that are happening.
yeah.
And then,
So it's exciting.
and Shelley, use then where we've been as a country.
Mhm.
Because a lot of the conversations I'm having with people right now is kind of, I feel like talking them off the ledge, right? First it was the worries about the election, and next is, the transition,
Yeah.
and I tell people that, well, listen, America has had its challenges in the past. We just happen to be in this one. So that's why it feels more real to us, right? The rest of them we had to read about, right? This one we're living through.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I go back to, and this is why I like going back to history, is, if you look back at the election of the second president of the United States, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams were very much at odds with each other, extreme, to this point that they actually didn't talk for a couple of years after that. But even despite their differences, they became friends again. The two men died on the same day,
Yeah, isn't that
50 years from the date of independence of our great country. And I think for me, it's an example of, at least our founders gave us the infrastructure of a government that says we can have conflict. That's why we have checks and balances, right? And Shelley, I agree with you. It's not about getting into the politics, but I think it's also about doing good, being nice. I'm not looking to blame somebody for what happened, or point the finger at somebody and say, aha, you lost, or aha, you won. It is, how do we come together to kind of solve the problems that we have, because there's so many good things that we can be doing.
Yes.
Let's put people back to work. Let's fix our infrastructure. Let's grow our economy. Those things that we can be growing and doing together, regardless of political affiliation.
I love this, because we're one. We need to be more united as one, and just putting all our collective efforts together to move forward in a great way. And I very well said.
Yeah.
But on that note, I think a lot of people haven't really understood the history of this country, and therefore, like you said, don't understand. And you're right. We're living it right now. We weren't living it 200 years ago. So.
And I think it answers, I was going to have another question about what your thoughts were about how we may evolve consciously as individuals or as a society, but that was a great answer. So I have one other question for you, Ted. What do you think true power is, considering everything is a power struggle out there?
Well, I think, it is funny. There was an interview done with Brene Brown with, President-elect now Joe Biden, when she asked this question. And I think they're really, I would agree with kind of the two possibilities. Either you have power over someone, or you have power with someone. And I think for me, it's the approach of having power that I think comes from kind of like a leadership style. And here's the example that I give. You can either work for a boss who's kind of like, one that you're afraid of, who kind of clubs you over the head like a baby seal when you don't do something right. And I'm not so sure that that's the best approach for me. Someone who is in power for me, because they haven't earned my respect, they haven't earned my trust, they've earned my fear, but they haven't necessarily earned, the leadership that I believe needs to come with leading people to follow with an idea, follow with a mission. And so I think in terms of, Shelley, to your question around, for me, power is the ability to not necessarily looking to convince you, but I'm looking to hear what you have to say. And I'm looking to be heard about what I have to say. And you can be heard when people can respect you or when you respect them. Mm-hmm. So power, I think, in my opinion, is about how do you get people to work through consensus, right? If I'm looking to simply have power over you, then I believe that's more of a short-term goal. And countries like, and I'll use our former, country affiliation with Great Britain. You can try to have power over someone, but eventually, unless you work together with them, I think you're going to see this separation. You've seen this with countries that had a lot of colonies that were trying to control them from a distance. France, Spain, the UK, Great Britain. That having simply power over rather than power with often led to what you had as independence later on. And when I extrapolate that into human interactions, my power over you is nowhere near as strong as my power to be with you. I can't remember the other way that Brene described it, but I completely agree. It's like a power with you or power through you.
Right.
Be able to get things accomplished. So.
Yeah.
Good points, Ted. A lot of times we empower others, we empower ourselves. So very well said.
Yeah. And I think, in terms of even thinking about a business that you run or a business that you manage, look, you can be 100% owner and controller of every aspect of the business, but don't ever plan on taking a vacation, right? And so if you want to be able to grow your business, I tell people there's only 168 hours in the week, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So there's only so much time and you're only so many things that you personally can do. Yeah. So one way to grow the business is to bring people into it that you can grow, that you can mold with the hopes that they're going to be taking over your role so that you can be doing other things that are, Shelley, going back to your question, empowering to the organization and to you personally, right?
Yes. Yes.
That's great, Ted. Wow.
Riveting.
You got me on a Friday.
Yeah, baby. Wow. So before we let you go, Ted, is there anything, any parting words of wisdom? Man, you gave a lot already, parting words of wisdom. But any or reminders to our listener or where they could find you, like your website or social media or anything like that?
Absolutely. It's funny. I say that in the context of I'm actually going through a rebranding of my website now.
Any 2.3 or whatever.
Yeah.
Exactly.
3.0.
3.0.
I love it.
But yeah, absolutely. I would say you can find me. The website is theodorejoycelaw.com. So you can go there to meet me. Obviously, through the two of you, love to have a conversation with someone. I don't charge for initial discussions. I feel like it's kind of crazy. I can't be charging you when I haven't diagnosed, what problems or issues may face. So, and it's part of my personality. I love that when I went down to Miami, it was for vacation that I went down to Miami for, but it was also a business meeting. And you know what? I turned part of that personal expenditure into a business expense by having a meeting down there. Right. And so I would say, yeah, I'd love to have a conversation with your group, the people who are members, who are listening to your great podcast and the messages that you provide, because I think you are both really empowering people to understand their archetypes, to understand, the influences in life that affect them, and kind of giving them the tools, the ammunition to be able to face the challenges they're going to face every day as a human and or as a business owner, and the things that business owners, what she has to face every day as a business owner. So.
That was awesome.
Yeah, definitely. And then go home and be a mom or a dad.
Exactly right. Yeah, that's my hats off to the people who are managing work, managing schools, schedules, managing to put food on the table. That's just amazing to me.
Wow.
It is. Yeah.
That was great, Ted. So we want to thank you for coming on to the show.
Thank you so much.
It was really a
Yes.
pleasure. And we definitely, I know I want to have you back, and I'm sure Shelley does want to have you back.
We are definitely going to have you back. And I want to shout out to everybody that's listening. What do you want to learn from Ted? Because we're here to teach, and we're going to put together all kinds of really cool things to help our viewers move forward in their lives.
Yeah. So, last parting words, I would say, this is one thing I'm very proud of. Whatever way you find to communicate with people, use that. Talk. I'm very proud que hablo español también et non solamente inglés. Et à la même temps, si vous avez quelconque question en français, en anglais, espagnol, je suis ici pour parler avec vous. I love the power of languages. I love the power of culture. I love the power of travel. I can't wait till we can really travel more together internationally. I really miss that. So, but it's been a pleasure to be here on the show with both of you. So,
Pleasure having you, Ted, as always.
Absolutely.
It was awesome.
Yeah. Thank you for your time, Teddy, and your wisdom. Love you.
my pleasure. Love you both too.
Group hug.
Group hug. Woo-hoo.
Group hug. All right, hang on for a second. I'm just gonna go off recording, but thank you. Toodles.
Toodles.
Thanks, Ted.
All right, that was awesome having Teddy Joyce on the show, sharing his business knowledge and his tax hacks for 2021.
Sure was.
Wasn't it, Shell? He's great. Can't wait to have him back on.
I know, he's just wonderful. He's so giving of his time and talent. He really is.
Yeah. So if this is your first time listening and you want to learn more about us, go back and listen to season 1, A Holistic Approach to Life. It really has a lot of great stuff in it. Great, just a lot of great stuff on really helping you to improve your life and to help you create a life vision, especially as we move forward into 2021. So if you enjoyed this episode, leave a review because it helps people find the show. And on the review, go ahead, mention Teddy Joyce and how he might have helped you, with your tax preparations. And then you can also mention how we may have inspired or motivated you. And also remember to subscribe and download on iTunes or YouTube, or you can find everything you need to know by going to our website, evolve360show.com. This is
Shelley Grace
and Shelley Devine with Life and Business with Soul. See you on the next Evolve 360 Shelley Shell Show. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you.
Okay. So this episode is brought to you by our 5-day Power Up Experience, where we want to share with you an amazing power play that happens many times, even more so now during this pandemic, where everyone wants to keep a seat at the table. Right, Shell?
You betcha. We're all doing more. We have less time for ourselves. All of a sudden, some of you are becoming teachers to your kids. You're still your CEOs of your businesses. You're helping and mentoring your teams. And where do you stand? All these power plays are coming into play. And as 2021 comes in, we want to give you some tools, techniques, strategies that you can do in real time to help you discern, become aware, and be your best self as you power up your business and your life. So stay tuned for our Power Up Challenge. If you're stressed, if you feel overwhelmed, if you're tired, if you're angry, these are power plays. So join us on eduville.com, our Power Up Learning Village. This is a first of many fun and interactive life-altering programs that we have put together just for you because you guys have asked us. You've reached out and said, Shelley, let's do this. So we have done it for you. So hands down, sign up. We're here. We got your back. And Shell, you got to say anything else?
Hey, it's free.
It's free. Love that word.
All right, thanks. Hope to see you guys on the other end. Take care and God bless.
Sign up below.